Shane, the Chargers got the first installment of the Harbaugh bounce last year, and that looked pretty decent. Led them to the playoffs. Obviously, the season didn't end quite the way they hoped it would when they got there. But the Bolts will certainly feel that they can contend for this division too, and they should be right in the mix.
They should be right in the mix, but I think you have to look at the strengths versus weaknesses from last season to try and figure out what exactly could be taken from them throughout this year. Like, in terms of discipline, yes, Harbaugh's really into them. They're one of the best teams in the league. They don't give up stupid penalties very often. They're quite disciplined. They take control of situations pretty well, which of course is something we don't always glean from the stats, but in terms of how you win games, that's important. They're also the best scoring defense in the league last year. Let's not forget that. But I think the success of last year has to be played with the caveat that they didn't win a lot of games against actual winning teams last season. Out of all of their 11 wins last season, only 3 came against teams that had a winning record, and 2 of those were against Denver. And I don't think they're beating Denver twice this year. They had one of the hardest schedules in the league last year. I think they have the 5th easiest this year. Now, I know the strength of schedule thing isn't always the most reliable thing to go on as we're looking ahead, but I definitely think that this year the Chargers have a more difficult challenge in their hands than they fully realize. Even if you look at the way that they not capitulated, but just didn't show up against the Texans last year was so ridiculously disappointing that there just seems to be something, and particularly the offensive side of the ball, that just doesn't get going at the right times. I'm not sure how much confidence I have in the run game. Justin Herbert can be explosive, can be consistent at times. You will see good October, November periods from him. But when we get into the nitty gritty of the season, can we expect the Chargers to go and beat the Broncos to win the division? If that is the case, to go into Arrowhead Stadium, I definitely think they'll have a great chance to beat the Chiefs when they play in Brazil on week 1. For me, the more I look into the Chargers, the more I get a sense of them, the more I try to get a really ahead as to how this division is going to go. I think the Broncos are in a much stronger position because of the talent they have in multiple different areas. They're not relying on one side of the ball more than the other, in a way that the Chargers are probably relying a lot more on their defense, an area that they haven't done a whole lot to improve on in comparison to the way that they drafted, for example, on offense. They brought in Omarion Hampton in the draft as a running back. That's obviously an area that they need to improve on, is trying to get more consistency in the running game and more variation in the running game as well. So if the Chargers are still going to be very strong, they're definitely going to be in the playoff hunt. They're going to be very difficult for somebody to beat. But in that sort of 3-team group that everybody's talking about, that's pressuring for the top of this division. Let's not forget the fact that the Raiders are going to be resurgent as well this year, by the way. But in that 3-team group, I think they have more weaknesses to be exposed as the year goes on. As much as the Harbaugh bounce and his ability to coach the team will be able to keep things strong in the later parts of the season, I just don't see it. I'll be honest with you. The more I think about the Chargers, the less I believe in their ability to go and take this division in a way that if they're in another division, they definitely could.
Kieran O'Donovan, there's a lot in what Shane Brennan said there, and a lot that I personally agree with. 2 years ago, pre-Harbaugh, we saw the Chargers with that epic collapse against the Jaguars. To be fair, from a Jaguars perspective, you'd say it was one of the best comebacks in playoff history. Last year, as we saw, the season ended with a no-show against the Texans, and that does seem to be a very Charger thing to do. It did seem year 1 was about Harbaugh fixing a lot of the basics, and mission accomplished there. But to Shane's point, has there enough fairy dust been sprinkled? And Lad McConkey was obviously a great bright spot, and you'd be looking for an even bigger leap ahead for him in year 2. That's one thing to be positive around. Have they done enough, though, bearing in mind, the point you made earlier? The coaching in this division is insane. The talent around them in this division is off the charts. It's going to be a big leap for anyone to think that this division could send 3 teams again to the playoffs, because we've seen improvements elsewhere across the AFC, as we'll be talking about in the coming weeks. They still have a lot of work to do to convince people.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, during this offseason, I have been convinced, and respectfully, I tend to disagree, Shane, with some of your points. And to be fair, there may be a lot more reasons on paper to believe in the Broncos, and on paper they seem to have taken a lot more steps in many respects. But again, I go back and look at what the Chargers managed to accomplish last year. They, again, looking at stats, I think they were the 11th overall defense. They were just outside the top 10. And that, you mentioned that being a strength of theirs, and they won 11 games. You talked about the run game, and I suppose you having doubts about the run game. I'm very excited about this run game. I read Albert Breer wrote for Sports Illustrated this week that the Chargers have built an offensive line that could block the sun. Now, I know that may be affected by the recent news just before we came on here that Rashawn Slater seems to have picked up what could be a significant injury. But you look at the development of Joe Alt in year 2, who had a great first season. And I think the key addition here to the Chargers was Mekhi Becton. You bring Mekhi Becton from a winning organization. You bring Mekhi Becton, one of the integral parts of the tush push, and one of the main reasons that Saquon rushed for over 2,000 yards last year. You add in an Omarion Hampton, who everybody is reporting that he is the real deal and could absolutely be a bell cow this season, and complement him with Najee Harris, who has the ability to do, to break off those big runs and to be that big, powerful, presence as well, to give them a 1-2 punch. Fair enough. Their offensive weapons, you might argue that they're limited. I know they were disappointed to lose Mike Williams to retirement. And again, I know that Justin Herbert was excited to have him back in the in the mix. I spoke to Chris Rim a couple of weeks ago from ESPN, and he mentioned that chemistry. But having said that, they add Keenan Allen, or they bring Keenan Allen back, another guy who Justin Herbert is has a real affinity for, and one guy that Chris Rim,
I spent a lot of time watching him last season, and Justin Herbert can have him back.
Yeah, but again, chemistry can be different, depending on, they do have that relationship, and the relationship, I think, is important.
Chemistry can be different, but wide receivers don't age like wine; they age like milk.
Okay. I'm just saying that there's reason to be hopeful. Watch out for one under the radar weapon, tight end Arande Gadsden. Chris Rim, again, he mentioned that, we talked about in the offseason about Harbaugh and the temptation to possibly go get Colston Loveland. But again, people on the ground are saying that this Aranda Gadsden could be a real steal, one of the late round picks that looks to be developing an early chemistry again with Justin Herbert.
Kieran Boyle, is Justin Herbert enough in the AFC?
I don't think so. I'm yet to be convinced of Herbert. I think, I hear Kieran's optimism, but I'm not as high on the Chargers this year. I think there's too many holes in that team overall. And Herbert, I don't want to say he seems lightweight, but he just seems a little bit fragile for somebody that plays in the NFL. A little susceptible. I know he plays hurt a lot, but I just don't see that kind of grit in his play. And I know they've added some nice weapons. We've talked about him already. Hampton's going to be a real good weapon, but I'm just not fully convinced about Herbert. I don't think I ever have been. And I've just been waiting years just to see something that's going to kind of show me, I guess, kind of like the Trevor Lawrence thing. I'm just waiting for something big, or waiting for a big season or a breakout. He has some pretty numbers from time to time, but is he that guy that's going to lead a team? And for me, the Chargers, there's been too many kind of losses. And my main concern with them is stopping the run. I mean, you've lost Joey Bosa, you've lost Poona Ford, and I don't think who they picked up is as good a replacement. Like Bonnie, a D tackle is not, he's not a Poona Ford, and we've got the Denzel Perryman issues, the legal issues that are going on with him as well. So we don't know, they may resurface during the season too. Like I said, Mike Williams gone. They picked up Keenan Allen, I think, yesterday, so they're a little light on the weapons outside. Quentin Johnson, still like Herbert, waiting for him to take off as well. Is he going to be somebody they can hang their hat on as maybe a wide receiver too? Which tight end will play? Will it be Conklin? Will it be Will Dissly? There's a lot of questions for me, too many questions, in all honesty, for me to kind of take the Chargers that seriously, notwithstanding the whole issue they have with their home stadium.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just about to ask you. I mean, you look at when the Lions won their first playoff game couple of years ago, and the support that they get, and you look at the blue chip franchises like the Steelers or the Packers, and those vociferous fan bases like the 12s, the Seahawks fans, and others. Those are fans that you fight and die for. Like, that's an atmosphere that can get you over a hump, as you say, that'll get guys tightening up their chin strap and going for one more play and putting their head into the mixer where it hurts. You don't have that in SoFi.
Yeah, and I've said it before. I mean, they've got that Southern California weather, kind of like the Dolphins. Is it too easy for them? Is it too comfortable? Is it a little bit too comfortable for them? And I think, in addition to the weapons they've lost on defense, I just have too many questions about that run defense, and just questions about Herbert. But notwithstanding the work that Harbaugh has done and kind of removed the stink of the Brandon Staley regime, so I think they might have overshot last year. I think they may revert a little bit back, maybe a win or two short for this year. So we'll see at the end of our discussion on the West. But I'm a little down on the Chargers this year.
Sorry, just one side quick thing on the too comfortable point. I just want a lot of point out is when we talk about the LA teams, we always seem to talk about the Chargers being the more comfortable ones, and the Rams. We don't that accusation isn't thrown around so much. You can see the difference in the two organizations and teams and how they responded the week after the LA fires. The Chargers came out and didn't perform well in Texas. Let's be fair about this. Where the Rams are very much the sort of personification of a tough city fighting in a tough situation. And I think, again, there's a cultural thing which is much deeper than Harbaugh or the players in terms of how tough that team is when it comes to the stretch in the winter months. So I definitely think that's a big point to look after as well.
Yeah. 2 points before we move off the Chargers that I'm duty bound to mention. Obviously, that we had Joe Alt on the show before his rookie season, so you can check that content out. You'll find it wherever you get your podcast. You can see it on our YouTube channel or indeed on any of our other socials. And also, of course, that Joe was one of the players who played for Notre Dame when they visited Ireland for the Aer Lingus College Football Classic, which is only around the corner, and at which we will be in full attendance alongside a capacity crowd. And looking forward to see Kansas State take on Iowa State in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic at the Aviva Stadium. Got there in the end. And we move on, Shane.
Did you? Sorry, Connor. Sorry to cut across you. Did you hear Joel talk about grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup this week?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was quite the experience. Who was the player who shamed himself by saying, "Did they put cheese on pizza in Italy?"
I think that might have been him. I won't be taking him for a pub quiz team anytime soon.
No. Yeah, stick to the day job.